I work on cargo ships, long hauls across the empty stretches of ocean. It's usually monotonous, the endless blue, the thrum of the engines, the routine. But this last trip was different. It started about 10 days out from port, somewhere in the Pacific. I was on a late watch, just me and the stars and the hiss of the bow cutting through the water. That's when I first saw it. A disturbance in the dark water off the port side, too large to be dolphins, too deliberate for a random wave. Then, a plume of mist shot up, illuminated briefly by the deck lights. A whale. Not unheard of, but this one was big. Really big. And it was close. The next morning, it was still there, keeping pace with us. A few of the other guys spotted it. Our bosun, a weathered old hand on the sea, squinted at it through his binoculars. "Humpback, by the looks of it," he grunted. "Big fella. Lost his pod, maybe." But there was something off about it. It wasn't just its size, though it was easily one of the largest I'd ever seen, rivaling the length of some of our smaller tenders. It was its back. It was a roadmap of scars. Not just the usual nicks and scrapes you see from barnacles or minor tussles. These were huge, gouged-out marks, some pale and old, others a more recent, angry pink. Long, tearing slashes, and circular, crater-like depressions. It looked like it had been through a war, and it was alone. Whales, especially humpbacks, are often social. This one was a solitary giant, a scarred sentinel in the vast, empty ocean. And it was following us. Not just swimming in the same general direction, but actively shadowing our ship. If we adjusted course, it adjusted too, maintaining its position a few hundred yards off our port side. This went on for the rest of the day. Some of the crew found it a novelty, a bit of wildlife to break the tedium. I just found it unsettling. There was an intelligence in the way it moved, in the occasional roll that brought a massive, dark eye to the surface, seemingly looking right at us. The second day was the same. The whale was our constant companion. The novelty had worn off for most. Now it was just there, a silent, scarred presence. I spent a lot of my off hours watching it. There was a weird sort of gravity to it. I couldn't shake the feeling that its presence meant something, though I couldn't imagine what. The scars on its back fascinated and repulsed me. What could do that to something so immense? A propeller from a massive ship? An orca attack, but on a scale I'd never heard of? Then, late on the second day of its appearance, something else happened. Our ship started to lose speed. Not drastically at first, just a subtle change in the engine's rhythm, a slight decrease in the vibration underfoot. The chief engineer, a perpetually stressed man, was down in the engine room for hours. Word came up that there was some kind of issue with one of the propeller shafts, or maybe a fuel line clog. Nothing critical, they said, but we'd be running at reduced speed for a while, at least until they could isolate the problem. That's when the whale's behavior changed. It was dusk. The ocean was turning that deep, bruised purple it gets before full night. I was leaning on the rail, watching it. The ship was noticeably slower now, the wake less pronounced. Suddenly, the whale surged forward, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. It dove, then resurfaced right beside the hull, maybe 20 yards out. And then it hit us. The sound was like a muffled explosion, a deep, resonant thump that vibrated through the entire vessel. Metal groaned. I stumbled, grabbing the rail. On the bridge, I heard someone shout. The whale surfaced again, its scarred back glistening, and then, with a deliberate, powerful thrust of its tail, it slammed its massive body into our hull again. Thump! This time, alarms started blaring. "What in the hell?" someone yelled from the deck below. The captain was on the wing of the bridge, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "All hands, report." What was that? The whale hit us a third time. This wasn't a curious nudge. This was an attack. It was ramming us. The impacts were heavy enough to make you think it could actually breach the hull if it hit a weak spot. Panic started to set in. A creature that size, actively hostile. We were a steel ship, sure, but the ocean is a big place, and out here, you're very much on your own. A few of the guys, deckhands mostly, grabbed gaff hooks and whatever heavy tools they could find, rushing to the side, yelling, trying to scare it off. The bosun appeared with a flare gun, firing a bright red star over its head. The whale just ignored it, preparing for another run. "Get the rifles," someone shouted. I think it was the second mate. "We need to drive it off." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Shooting it? A whale? It felt monstrously wrong, but it was also ramming a multi-ton steel vessel, and that was just insane. It could cripple us, or worse, damage itself fatally on our hull, before anyone could get a clear shot. As a group of crew members gathered with rifles on the deck, the whale suddenly dove deep. It vanished into the darkening water as if it had never been there. The immediate assumption was that the show of force, the men lining the rail, had scared it off. We waited, tense, for a long 5 minutes. Nothing. The ship continued its slow, laborious crawl through the water. The captain ordered damage assessments. Miraculously, apart from some scraped paint and a few dented plates above the waterline, our ship seemed okay. But the mood was grim. What if it came back? Why would a whale do that? Rabies? Some weird sickness? It's the slowdown, the veteran sailor said, his voice low, as he stood beside me later, staring out at the black water. Animals can sense weakness. Ship's wounded, moving slow. Maybe it thinks we're easy prey, or dying. Prey? I asked. It's a baleen whale, isn't it? It eats krill. The veteran sailor just shrugged, his weathered face unreadable in the dim deck lights. Nature's a strange thing, kid. Out here, anything's possible. The engine problems persisted. We were making maybe half our usual speed. Every creak of the ship, every unusual slap of a wave against the hull, had us jumping. The whale didn't reappear for the rest of the night, or so we thought. My watch came around again in the dead of night, the hours between 2 and 4 a.m. The deck was mostly deserted. The sea was calm, black glass under a star-dusted sky. I was trying to stay alert, scanning the water, my nerves still frayed. And then, I saw it. A faint ripple, then the gleam of a wet back, much closer this time. It was the whale. It had returned, but only when the deck was quiet, when I was, for all intents and purposes, alone. My heart hammered. I reached for my radio, ready to call it in. But then it did something that made me pause. It didn't charge. It just swam parallel to us, very close, its massive body a dark shadow in the water. It let out a long, low moan, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones more than I heard it with my ears. It was an incredibly mournful, almost pained sound. Then, it slowly, deliberately, bumped against the hull. Not a slam, not an attack. A bump. Like a colossal cat rubbing against your leg. Thump. Then another. Thump. It was the strangest thing. It was looking right at me, I swear it. One huge, dark eye, visible as it rolled slightly. It seemed, I don't know, desperate. It kept bumping the ship, always on the port side where I stood, always these strange, almost gentle impacts that I didn't call it in. I just watched. This wasn't the aggressive creature from before. This was something else. It continued this for nearly an hour. The moment I saw another crew member, a sleepy-looking engineer on his way to the galley, emerge onto the deck further aft, the whale sank silently beneath the waves and was gone. It was as if it only wanted me to see it, to witness this bizarre, pleading behavior. The next day, the engineers were still wrestling with the engines. We were still slow, and the whale kept up its strange pattern. During the day, if a crowd was on deck, it stayed away, or if it did approach and men rushed to the rails with shouts or weapons, it would dive and disappear. But if I was alone on deck, or if it was just me and maybe one other person who wasn't paying attention to the water, it would come close. It would start the bumping. Not hard, not damaging, but persistent. Thump, thump, thump. It was eerie. It felt like it was trying to communicate something. The other crew were mostly convinced it was mad, or that the ship's vibrations, altered by the engine trouble, were agitating it. The talk of shooting it became more serious. The captain was hesitant, thankfully. International maritime laws about protected species, but also, I think, a sailor's reluctance to harm such a creature unless absolutely necessary. Still, rifles were kept ready. I started to feel a strange connection to it. Those scars, that mournful sound it made when it was just me. It didn't feel like aggression. It felt like a warning, or a plea. But for what? I'd stare at its scarred back and wonder again what could inflict such wounds. The gashes looked like they were made by something with immense claws, or teeth that weren't like a shark's. The circular marks were even weirder, almost like suction cups, but grotesquely large, and with torn edges. The morning it all ended, I was on the dawn watch. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, a pale, gray smear. The sea was flat, oily. We were still crawling. The whale was there, off the port side, as usual. It had been quiet for the last few hours, just keeping pace. I felt a profound weariness. 3 days of this. 3 days of the ship being crippled. 3 days of this scarred giant shadowing us. Its intentions a terrifying enigma. I remember sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out at the horizon, when I saw the whale react. It suddenly arched its back, its massive tail lifting high out of the water before it brought it down with a tremendous slap. The sound cracked across the quiet morning like a gunshot. Then it dove, a panicked, desperate dive, not the slow, deliberate submergence I was used to. It went straight down, leaving a swirling vortex on the surface. What the hell now? I muttered, gripping the rail. My eyes scanned the water where it had disappeared. And then I saw it. Further back, maybe half a mile behind us, something else was on the surface. At first, it was just a disturbance, a dark shape in the gray water. But it was moving fast, incredibly fast, closing the distance to where the whale had been. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't any whale I'd ever seen. As it got closer, still mostly submerged, I could see its back. It was long, dark, and glistening, but it wasn't smooth like a whale's. It had ridges, and things sticking out of it. 2 of them, on either side of its spine, arcing up and then back. They weren't fins. Not like a shark's dorsal fin, or a whale's flippers. They looked like wings. Leathery, membranous wings, like a bat's, but colossal, and with no feathers, just bare, dark flesh stretched over a bony framework. They weren't flapping. They were held semi-furled against its back, cutting through the water like grotesque sails. The thing was slicing through the ocean at a speed that made our struggling cargo ship look stationary. A cold dread, so absolute it was almost paralyzing, seized me. This was what the whale was running from. This was the source of its scars. The winged thing reached the spot where our whale had dived. It didn't slow. It just tilted and slipped beneath the surface without a splash, as if the ocean were a veil it simply passed through. For a minute, nothing. The sea was calm again. Deceptively so. I was shaking, my coffee cup clattering against the saucer I'd left on the railing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Flesh wings? In the ocean, then the water began to change color. Slowly at first, then with horrifying speed. A bloom of red spread outwards from the spot where they'd both gone down. A slick, dark, crimson stain on the gray morning sea. It grew wider and wider. The whale. Our whale. I felt sick. A profound sense of horror and, strangely, loss. That scarred giant, with its mournful cries and strange, bumping pleas. It hadn't been trying to hurt us. It had been terrified. It had been trying to get our attention, trying to warn us, maybe even seeking refuge with the only other large thing in that empty stretch of ocean, our ship. And when we slowed down, when we became vulnerable, it must have known we were drawing its hunter closer. Or maybe it was trying to get us to move faster, to escape. The slamming, it was desperate. The blood slick was vast now, a hideous smear on the calm water. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My crewmates were starting to stir, a few coming out on deck, drawn by the dawn. I heard someone ask, "What's that?" "Oil spill." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was still staring at the bloody water, a good quarter-mile astern now as we slowly pulled away. And then, something broke the surface in the middle of it. It rose slowly, terribly. It wasn't the whale. First, a section of that ridged, dark back, then those hideous, furled wings of flesh. And then, its head. Or what passed for a head. There were no eyes that I could see. No discernible features, really, except for what was clearly its mouth. It was a hole. A vast, circular maw, big enough to swallow a small car, and it was lined, packed, with rows upon rows of needle-sharp, glistening teeth, some as long as my arm. They weren't arranged like a shark's, in neat rows. They were a chaotic forest of ivory daggers, pointing inwards. The flesh around this nightmare orifice was pale and rubbery, like something that had never seen the sun. It just was. A vertical abyss of teeth, hovering above the blood-stained water. It wasn't looking at the ship, not in a general sense. It was higher out of the water than I would have thought possible for something of that bulk without any visible means of buoyancy beyond the slight unfurling of those terrible wings, which seemed to tread water with a slow, obscene power. It rotated slowly. And then it stopped. And I knew, with a certainty that froze the marrow in my bones, that it was looking at me. There were no eyes. I will swear to that until the day I die. There was nothing on that featureless, toothed head that could be called an eye. But I felt its gaze. A cold, ancient, utterly alien regard. It wasn't curious. It wasn't even malevolent. not in a way I could understand. It was like being assessed by a butcher. A focused, chilling attention, right on me, standing there on the deck of our vessel. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the ship, the distant chatter of the waking crew, faded away. It was just me and that thing, staring at each other across a widening expanse of bloody water. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. Then, the chief engineer came up beside me, the same one who'd been battling our engine troubles. "God Almighty," he whispered, his face pale. "What in the name of all that's holy is that?" The spell broke. The thing didn't react to the chief. Its focus, if that's what it was, remained on me for another second or two. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it began to sink back beneath the waves, its toothed maw the last thing to disappear into the red. The captain was on the bridge wing, binoculars pressed to her eyes, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Orders were shouted. "Full power. Get us out of here. Whatever you have to do, Chief, give me everything you've got." Suddenly, the engine problem that had plagued us for days seemed less important. Miraculously, or perhaps spurred by the sheer terror of what we just witnessed, the engines roared to life, the ship shuddering as it picked up speed, faster than it had moved in days. No one spoke for a long time. We just stared back at the bloody patch of water, shrinking in our wake. The silence was heavier than any storm. The realization hit me fully then, like a physical blow. The wail. The scars. The way it only approached when I was alone, bumping the hull, moaning. It wasn't trying to hurt us. It was running. It was terrified. It was trying to tell us, trying to warn us. Maybe it even thought our large, metal ship could offer some protection, or that we could help it. When we slowed down, we became a liability, a slow-moving target that might attract its pursuer. Its frantic slamming against the hull when the ship first slowed. It was trying to get us to move, to escape the fate it knew was coming for it. And it had singled me out for some reason. Maybe I was just the one on watch most often when it was desperate. Maybe it sensed. I don't know. I don't want to know. The rest of the voyage was a blur of hushed conversations, wide eyes, and constant, fearful glances at the ocean. We reported an unidentified aggressive marine phenomenon and the loss of a whale, but how do you even begin to describe what we saw? Who would believe it? The official log was sanitized. We made it to port. I signed off the ship as soon as we docked. I haven't been back to sea since. I don't think I ever can.